Righto guys, so the little revision, it fits mint. So we've got it perfect this time. This is what will be going in the car, so I'll transfer all this stuff into this one and it'll all be happy days. We'll start marking and drilling and getting it in there. There you go guys, that's how it goes in, that's how it fits, it's bolted up. Obviously without the fascia, it's going to be a bit of Tetris to get the fascia in there at the same time, but obviously I'm not putting it all together. I've only chucked the dash in for fitment. Because we still have to sort out the wiring for the 12-volt socket and stuff like that, and there's still some stuff behind the dash we've got to sort out. We still have to pin and see whether the boys at Whitey's actually wired in the fuel level sender to the dash. I can't remember if we even talked about it. It's been that long. Can't even remember if it was asked for, if we requested it. So we'll have to do some checking for that, test it, make sure that that's in there. The other thing is the rotary dial. I don't know why, don't ask me why, but I had it in my head that it was a CAN item and it worked over the CAN network, but I was wrong. It is just a simple 5-volt input, so it's just a potentiometer pretty much, and you set obviously what each level does in the ECU, but I'll have to check the boys pin out from Whitey's, but I believe that we don't have any 5-volt inputs left on the ECU. But an update that we've all sort of known that was coming for a long time, firmware update for the dashes and ECUs. No longer will the dash just be a display. It will also be able to relay information back to the ECU. So no longer are these dashes just a display, they are also now can be used as a master, and they can actually be an expansion unit for your ECU. That should mean that we can just wire the rotary dial straight to the dash, to a 5-volt input on the dash, and then use that to talk to the ECU. So we'll just have to make sure that that update is already out. I'm not sure if it is at this point that I'm making this video, and obviously the plan at the moment is for this car to get collected next weekend. So if that update's not already out and it's not going to be out before this is ready for the dyno this week, well, that's going to be no good. We're going to have to find a way to put it into the ECU and maybe put something that's a little less critical into the dash for now, and wait for that update to be able to then relay that back to the ECU for some safeties. So something else, maybe like trans oil temp or something. It's not so critical at this point, but then later on it can just go back to the ECU when that firmware update comes out. So anyway, so the fit's good. I'm really happy with where it is. It's awesome. Super happy with it. The placement, everything else. There is also a new update on the ECU side of things from Haltech. They've been coming out some freaking wicked updates lately. There's a new predicted film model, which is a really good addition to the modeling of the ECU. It really, as far as when we tuners talk about how good an ECU is, it really brings Haltech up a long way. But obviously Haltech's always been much more accessible. It's a lot easier to find tuners for. A lot more after-sales support, a lot more aftermarket support and items. So it's always had a leg up with that, but with some of these updates they're bringing for the modelings, the fuel modelling for the ECUs and stuff, they're really starting to become a very obvious, clear choice. And then especially with things like this, now being able to be an expansion as well. You look at being able to buy like a Nexus R3, an IC7, and a CAN keypad, and what you can do with those 3 items is just, it's getting awesome. So big ups to Haltech, it's freaking wicked. But anyway, I digress. What I was getting at is that in some of these updates, they are actually updating the predicted gear. Obviously, you've always been able to set your gear indicator based on RPM versus output speed or wheel speed. That way, obviously, it knows based on those 2 factors what gear it should be in. But the issue that we have, or that you have with auto cars with big torque converters, is that can change a lot. It's not so much definitive once you've got a torque converter, because it changes how much slip there is and what RPM you can be doing in multiple different gears at the same road speed because of the slippage. So they do have a new way of modeling that, which hopefully should work for this car, which is good. So hopefully we'll be able to get a pretty accurate gear indicator on the dash. Like, you can buy the potentiometer ones, the ones for the casing, but much like what this one in the dash is already going to do, it's only going to tell you where the shifter is selected or what gear the shifter has selected. In order to actually have a clear indication of the gears that it's in when it's an automatic car with an automatic valve body, makes things a bit harder. So hopefully that works and it's right. Not a huge deal for this car, except for the fact that it'd be nice to have a clear gear indicator that's actually working 100%. But on other cars, such as our panel van over here. Really handy and good because with the fly-by-wire we can actually then set up the cruise control without too much trouble. So anyway, I digress again. But anyway, that's sick. Wait and sort out some wiring and stuff behind it, and then we'll try and fit it all back together. But that's like pretty much the last real big job, except for having to fix this diff now. Pretty well sorted, and I'm really happy with the end result. So I'm really happy with the way that we've been able to work everything in together. Package it all together really well. Have our USB ports and stuff down here that they're hidden, they're out of the way of the shifter. So yeah, really happy with the end result of this whole setup. The shifter, the IC7, where it sits in the dash, what you can still see. We do have now our speedo cable has finally arrived that we've been waiting for this thing, for T400 to these speedos. The only issue I think is that with our square wave adapter on the gearbox, I don't think we really have much option as far as what gear is on the indicator. So we'll still have speed on the Haltech, which is all sweet. We'll be able to calibrate that and make sure that it's right, but I just don't know whether this speedo is going to be 100% accurate. But I mean, there'll be 2 speedos anyway, so it's not going to be that big of a deal. So that, and I'm pretty sure I used the hole in the firewall for the speedo cable for our wideband, so we might have to look at trying to relocate the wideband through a different hole. But anyway, it was a fair bit of blabber, but really happy with how this has all come together. Yeah, stoked. Bloody stoked, guys. So that bolt's there, but then the fascia covers those bolts, and yeah, should all look really good. It's just gonna be, we'll see how it goes with the Tetris game, trying to get it in there all together. Righto guys, few developments. The diff has been out, been modified, brake lines redone, back installed, rebled. The boys have sorted all that out, so the diff's all sorted out now. They also sorted out something that we've been needing to do for ages, which is the little pea-shooter decoy out the back. Put that exhaust back on so that, you know, from the back it does just look like it is still a 186. People with a good ear will realize it probably doesn't really sound much like a 186, but yeah, cool little just pea-shooter decoy, which we spoke about with the Onus Stay Dot. So it does look like we do have a spare AVI on the ECU, which means we don't have to swap things around, which is good, because something Rex pointed out when I started talking to him about that was we couldn't put either the oil temp from the gearbox oil or the oil temp from the engine oil into the dash, because the dash, well, sorry, into the dash, because the ECU needs to control the fans for both of those oil coolers, which means it needs that information in the dash. So neither of those are going to work. So it is good that we have a spare AVI, so we can just wire that rotary dial to that spare AVI. And I also was right, the hole that I put the wideband through in the firewall was for the speedo cable. So with the speedo cable now installed, the boys did have to relocate that, which was a bit of a pain, but anyway, a bit of an oversight on my part. But yeah, moving along with it all. With that diff sorted, this thing's basically back to being movable. All right, boys and girls, Big Barra is about to move under its own power for the first time in 2 years.
What a time to be alive. Right, here goes nothing. It's been tested that the brakes and everything work before we go shoving it in gear.
Yeah.
So just, the brakes work, the handbrake does work too, so we shouldn't get into too much trouble.
All right. Yeehaw, let's watch it move. Get it outside and give it a quick wash, quick blast. Woo!
Horns work.
Horns work.
Got the right wires for those ones.
First time she's moved under her own power in a long time. All right, so the power steering is not working, so we're gonna have to do some investigating into what's going on there, why that's not working. But anyway, apart from that, look at that, moving under its own power, ready for a wash. It's outside for the first time in a long time. How exciting, how good. Yeehaw. Alright guys, look at that, it's all clean. Clean for the first time in like years. Look how good it freaking looks. Red hot. So we didn't quite get it onto the dyno today, but hopefully tomorrow, get it on there for a bit of a run in. Righto guys, it's taken a bit of screwing around, but we are getting this thing pretty well sorted and nearly ready to go on the dyno. We had a few issues with the trigger sync or trigger error from the Haltech. So obviously we were working from just a Barra base file, and we went from there and started modifying to get everything right. So we had assumed that obviously all the trigger settings and stuff in the base file would be right, but obviously Haltech must be, I'd say, allowing for a lot more EMF interference in the standard loom, standard car, than obviously we're getting in our bloody U-Butte white is wiring loom, is what I'm assuming. But after a couple of changes to arming voltages, whoopsies. Yeah, after a couple of changes to arming voltages and some trigger filtering and stuff like that, we sort of managed to get rid of a lot of those sync errors and a lot of the trigger issues that we were having, and it's looking all good. We also found the right calibration for the ISC we're using. It's hard using these GM style ISCs because they're not all the same. So GM have one, Chrysler have one. A lot of the aftermarket ones, like this one here, are a Chrysler style IAC, and the pinouts are actually a little bit different in the way they drive. The IAC motor is actually a little bit different, so it is a bit different to get right. And if you're not careful, you can burn the one out if you use the wrong one. But either way, it's working. The IAC is working now, which is bloody awesome. We didn't even have to touch it with tools. So yeah, at this stage, this thing's pretty well finally ready to go on the dyno for a run-in. We're not going to get it on at the moment because this is a priority right now, this ute, which is just about ready to go back on almost. But yeah, pretty soon, should have this thing on there for a bit of a run-in. Looking forward to it. God, it looks good clean. Don't mind the rattle, guys, it's just this panel's not bolted down properly, but look at it, it's on the dyno for the first time. Well, not the first time, but the first time since it's had the barrier in it at least. But so we had a little bit of a power steering issue. What we found was that the two excite wires, or the two control wires for the power steering pump, actually have to both be positive 12, not 12 and negative, which was a very simple fix because instead of the output that it was in on the ECU, and what it was doing is on accessories it was working because it was open circuited, so it's 12. But once you hit the key and it started, the ECU would earth out that trigger and it would kill the pump. That's what I was working on accessories, but not when it was running. But very simple fix because the second fly-by-wire driver was not being used. So we were able to just T-pin it out of where it was, put it in the fly-by-wire pin, which actually can supply a positive 12. So now it works the way it's supposed to work, and it actually is working. Now, apart from that, we had just some issues with the triggers, which we sorted out. And we're now pretty well ready for a run-in. Bo this morning reset the coilovers. Obviously our Barra and everything else in the front's a little bit heavier than the 186 because we had to move the fronts up a bit to stop them from scrubbing at lock. And we've adjusted everything else, and we're good to go for a run-in now. Yeah, this will just be a run-in. We've been told very exclusively very importantly by the person who built the diff to not do any power runs for quite a while, get some run time on the diff. His words were, don't put it on a dyno, do 1,000 Ks, don't even go near a dyno. But obviously we're not in a position where we can do that. So just a nice run in on the dyno, same thing we do with engines, just to bed the rings in, get some load up, just see how everything goes with some heat, get everything hot, yeah, bed these rings in, get some time on this diff and gearbox and everything else. And then we're not even gonna bother any power runs at the moment until we've changed oil and double checked everything and yeah, put some fresh oil in it and stuff, and then we'll bother with starting to do the actual power tune. But yeah, exciting nonetheless. We're on the dyno. Rightio guys, so we just got off the phone with Haltech. Rex has been talking to Haltech. Did you have him on TeamViewer, Rex?
Yeah, remote session.
Yeah, remote session with Haltech to try and figure out what this issue we're having is. And Haltech, their after sales support and is, it's second to none. They're always super, super helpful. And like I was saying earlier in this exact video, with the way the direction they're going with their modeling and their peripherals, it's really starting to get really hard to justify any other ECU on the market lately. It's wild. But anyway, have been a great help trying to find some things. But it doesn't appear to be anything to do with the triggers or trigger related, what we've got left. Obviously, there was something there because it was getting better with what we were trying before. But what we're at the moment and what we're dealing with doesn't appear to be anything to do with the tune or triggers. So we have had a car that did a similar thing before. It was a Toyota Sora that also had a deadhead set up in the fuel rail. And what it ended up being was hammer in the rail, and being somewhat deadhead because of the manifold and rail setup and the not being able to actually run it through the rail at all. You know, it had to be deadhead. So being deadhead and having big injectors, which, you know, when they shut off, it's much like a valve shutting on an intake manifold or an exhaust manifold, where you do get a low pressure wave that comes back up the line once the injector closes. And what this can do is create you know, a lot of pulsing and stuff going on with the fuel in the rail.
So what happens is, like Max said, if you get the injectors opening and shutting, you're getting high pressure and low pressure waves pulsing up and down. And what happens is, when you get to just the wrong frequency, it just so happens that you'll get a low pressure wave going right past an injector as it opens, and it's essentially like the injector has no fuel pressure, and you get misfires and lean spots.
It's the same way scavenging works in an exhaust manifold. It's just happening in the fuel rail, where just when the injector's trying to open, it's got a low pressure wave and it's drawing. It's, you know, that's what's going on essentially, is what we think, because we have dealt with this issue before. So in order to fix it, the best thing to do is to get a fuel pulsation dampener. This is why they make fuel pulse dampers. So that is a plausible solution, which we would probably put in line from the reg to the rail. But in order to test it,
the outlet there.
In order to test it, obviously your dampener takes a lot of that out, which is the point of them. But in order to test it, what we can do is just replace that one bit of PTFE with like a fairly long, just big long rubber hose, just on put some push lock just for now. And the rubber obviously gives that little bit of room of expansion and allows a lot of dampening, whereas the PTFE and hardline obviously doesn't allow for any of that. So that's a good way for us to check, make sure that that is it. If we do find that it is a lot better with the rubber, we can buy a fuel pulsation dampener and another fitting and put it in line. So hopefully that's as simple as that, because we can have that fixed very fast. And hopefully after that, we are on our way with this thing. But we're just gonna do a little bit more running in, and then yeah, that's gonna be this thing. Then we'll chuck it back on the hoist and everything else. Anyway, guys, I think that'll do it for an episode. I think this episode's probably already pretty long, but you've got to see the thing nearly finished. It's started, it's running, it's on the dyno. It's running, we're so close. So tune in for the next episode, which fingers crossed is the last episode, guys, where we can show you the results. You can see this thing do some power runs, we'll get some results for you, and hopefully button it all up and have it pretty much finished and good to go. What a time it's been. Anyway, thanks for watching as always, guys. Smash like, smash subscribe. We'll see you on the next episode. Peace out, see you, bye. Special thanks to barratheworld.com and Raceworks, both huge helps with this build, so special thanks to those two. Peace out, see you, bye.